This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
You have lots of questions about your own life and this really complex world around you. I'm Saroja Coelho. I'm the host of the new live call-in show, Just Asking. I take your questions about what's in the news or your finances, health, even your relationships, and then throw them to an expert. Just Asking. Let's figure it out together.
Just Asking with Saroja Coelho. Live Saturday afternoon at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, and on CBC Listen.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show. Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're minus 11 degrees with windy flurries over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba is the first province to offer a housing benefit to survivors of gender-based violence, which does not require income testing in the first year. The program is co-developed with the federal government under the Canada Housing Benefit. Bernadette Smith is Manitoba's housing minister.
This recognizes that individuals exiting violence may be experiencing financial abuse or face barriers to accessing other types of benefits because of complex financial issues. This prioritizing of the needs of survivors will be the first of its kind implemented in Canada.
Smith says the benefit will be based on family size and regional rental rates. Survivors of gender-based violence could qualify for between $350 and $800 a month. The benefit is expected to support more than 2,600 households. Winnipeg police have arrested a Calgary man in a case of human trafficking. Police say they went to a short-term vacation rental in the 300 block of Hargrave on March 21st. They were checking on a woman after Quebec police said she may be the victim of human trafficking. Inside, they found the 18-year-old woman and a 24-year-old man in the suite. Police say the suspect met the victim in a bar in Montreal in early January. He manipulated her to believe they were in a romantic relationship. He then transported her to 4 cities in Ontario, working westward and ending up in Winnipeg. Police say she was forced into becoming an escort and selling sexual services. A 24-year-old man is facing a number of charges. The province says preliminary numbers show 445 Manitobans died from drugs last year. Joseph Forey's 31-year-old son Harlan was one of them. He died of fentanyl poisoning. Forey says he's not surprised.
We've been tracking the numbers all year, and we knew that we were going to surpass last year's numbers. So it's a bit disheartening, and it's an indication of what's out there right now is not working.
Forey has started a foundation in his son's honor to help those with addictions. He says something has to change in the province's approach and would like to see more not-for-profit treatment centers. Cross Lake RCMP are investigating a homicide in Pumachikamak Cree Nation. RCMP went to a home in the community after they received a report of a deceased woman. They found the body of a 45-year-old woman inside the home. A man was arrested at the scene. It's being investigated as a homicide. And now to Baltimore.
Never would you think that you would physically see the Key Bridge tumble down like that. It looked like something out of an action movie. That is Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott after the collapse early this morning of the 4-lane Francis Scott Key Bridge. It came down after one of its support columns was rammed by a cargo ship. An unknown number of people ended up in the water. At least 8 were with a construction crew doing routine maintenance on the bridge. Of that number, 2 have been rescued. Katie Simpson has more from the scene.
There's a helicopter searching this area for 6 people, members of a construction crew that were on the bridge at the time. We're still trying to figure out from authorities exactly who else might be missing or might be trapped at this point. Authorities were able to get a rescue message from the ship when it was experiencing some sort of power problem in the moments just before it actually struck the bridge. Because of that message, authorities were able to stop and slow the flow of traffic onto the bridge, but it's unclear how many vehicles were actually on the bridge at the time it collapsed. Right now, the Coast Guard is working with the FBI, is working with local authorities. It's a very difficult search given the weather conditions. The water is quite cold. The investigation, what led up to this incident, that is taking a back seat in this moment. The one thing authorities are very clear on, at this point, they say there are no signs this is terrorism related. At this point, it's looking like a really bad accident. Katie Simpson, CBC News, near Baltimore.
Emergency officials, meanwhile, say the cargo vessel, which was leaving the port of Baltimore, collided with the bridge at roughly 1:30 this morning, and the vessel remains lodged under the wreckage. The Key Bridge is a vital transportation link in the Baltimore area, with more than 30,000 people using it every day. The province says with the way the spring melt is going so far, the risk of significant flooding in most parts of Manitoba is low to moderate. The March flood outlook says water levels are expected to remain below dikes and community flood protections. There was normal to below normal soil moisture at freeze-up and well below normal precipitation this winter in most regions. The outlook says the risk is low for the Red River and low to moderate for the Assiniboine and Interlake region. But the province says this could change with significant spring precipitation. And 2 Canadians have made the shortlist for the world's most valuable literary prize. It's the Dublin Literary Award, and Emma Donoghue is in the running for her novel Haven. So too is Suzette Mayer for her Giller Prize-winning novel The Sleeping Car Porter. The winner of the $150,000 honor will be announced on May 29th. Looking at the forecast, in Winnipeg, cloudy and windy with scattered flurries today, a high around -7. In Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud and flurries, a high of -7. In Dauphin, partly cloudy, a high of -9 degrees. In Flin Flon, sunny, a high of -7. Thompson, sunshine, a few clouds, a high of -7. And in Churchill, sunny with a high of -13. Right now, you're listening to CBC.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon for Tuesday, March 26th. I'm Lori Hoogstraten. Coming up on the show today, new data shows Manitoba is on pace to break another record for drug deaths in 2023. We'll hear from a man whose son was among the people who died last year. And fly like an eagle and land with all your eagle friends in the branches of Manitoba trees. We'll find out more about these roving gangs of birds at 12:35. Also coming up, we'll hear about new funding to help house survivors of gender-based violence in Manitoba. But first up, a loan of $140 million from the Canada Infrastructure Bank was just announced. We'll hear from the Mayor of Brandon about what that will mean for the city's water and waste projects. Money will be flowing into 5 Manitoba communities thanks to a just-announced combined loan from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. $140 million is earmarked for projects delivering cleaner water and better wastewater treatment for approximately 78,000 homes. The impacted communities include the rural municipalities of Taché, Hanover, Richaud, the town of Niverville, and the city of Brandon. I spoke with Brandon Mayor Jeff Fawcett earlier and asked him what slice of the loan the city will get.
I believe it's the $43 million. So the borrowing on $43 million.
Okay, borrowing, of course. So $43 million. How far does that go in solving a few of your problems?
It goes a long way. So that is half of our borrowing for our water treatment plant and our lift stations that are really important to our community. So that does go a long way. It's $1 million a year in savings.
Yeah. And so what is it that you need to do with this money?
So the projects?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have our water treatment plant.
Right.
It's the biggest project, capital project we've ever had in the city. So that's essential, for the whole of our city to make sure that we have good quality water for everyone. And then the lift stations allow us to continue to build up to 2,800 homes.
And have you been?
So that's real important.
Oh, sorry. Can you say that again?
That's really important, the additional infrastructure to help us build.
The lift stations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much have you been counting on getting this money?
Well, we've always had good faith with CIB. Like this has been going on about a good 2 years, maybe more, and it's always been in good faith, and it just taken time. But we were fairly confident through the process that it was something that was going to work out. But that being said, the fact that it has, now it does definitely benefit us.
Yeah.
We were having to work, without it because it hadn't come to fruition, but there was a hope that, and a trust in our institutions as we worked through this, that we would be able to get to this point.
Mm-hmm. So what was it contingent upon? What would have been the deal breaker?
Oh, I don't think there was a lot of deal breaker. It takes time to put together these big deals, and of course we've got partners, out in the Niverville area there, that are the other end of this. So it was packaging everything together, and then CIB had to do work on their end to sort of put together the borrowing groups. So there's just a lot of work. Like it just takes time, and I know a lot of people don't have a lot of patience for things, but in our government world at times we have to, because it just takes time to get things done.
Sure. So how far along are you with these projects? Do they remain in the planning stages until you get this money in your hands, or were you able to move forward on it to a certain extent?
No, we've been moving forward on our treatment plant, and so the phase 2 is out there now. And hopefully we'll be able to get our first tender out right away for the lift stations. Mm-hmm.
And how will the loan be paid back? Is it interest-free? How does all that work?
Well, it's just that half is with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, so that's at the best borrowing rate you can get in the country.
Okay,
so it's just paid back like anything else. It's just that for that half, the $43 million, we will have the best interest rates you can get.
And how long do you have to pay it back?
It's 30 year.
30 year, okay.
Yeah. So, and it's a fixed to about $1 million saving a year.
And that comes out of what? Property taxes and so on?
And utilities. Most of that will be coming out of the utilities because it's all water-based.
Okay. Now, you mentioned putting out the tender and so on, but what are the challenges when you've been planning these projects and waiting for the money, and now it's all coming together? Now what?
Now we carry on as we were hoping to. Like it was just a matter of timing. We've always been working with them in good faith, and we just knew it took time to sort of finalize everything. And so our ducks are in a row, and we're ready to keep moving forward with this really, really good news for us.
And what's this going to mean to the city of Brandon?
Well, it means a better interest rate on some of the biggest projects, like the water treatment plant is the largest infrastructure project we've ever done. So to get half of that at the best interest rate we can makes a huge difference. So it's potentially at the $30 million savings.
Yeah, a good day for Brandon.
Very good day.
Jeff Fawcett is the mayor of Brandon. Today it was announced that the Canada Infrastructure Bank, or CIB, is loaning a combined $140 million to support 5 communities, including Brandon, with water and wastewater infrastructure projects.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And I'm Phelan. We're the hosts of the irreverent history podcast, The Secret Life of Canada.
We've covered everything from the history behind the iconic Bay blanket to why blackface is still a thing, and how all our histories can be traced back to our relationship with water.
Oh, you forgot about the controversial debate over which dessert is the most Canadian, the butter tart or the Nanaimo bar.
Yes, I did forget that. That was intense.
The Secret Life of Canada. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Radio Noon. It is 13 minutes after 12 o'clock. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. And coming up later in the show, Bilbo the Hobbit said the Eagles are coming. But in fact, they're already here in Manitoba, and they're in surprising numbers. We'll chat with an eagle expert at 12:35. And coming up, we'll hear about new funding to help house survivors of gender-based violence in Manitoba. And later on, we'll speak to a man whose son was among the 445 people who died last year from drug deaths. Taking a look at the forecast. This is Riley's forecast, so it's got to be good. Mainly cloudy today with scattered flurries and highs of -7. Down to -11 tonight, cloudy with a few lingering flurries, he says. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy in the morning, a few sunny breaks in the afternoon, highs of -5. Partly cloudy and -12 on Wednesday night. It's going up to 1 degree on Thursday. Yay! Finally above zero. Friday, 2, and mainly sunny with a few clouds in the afternoon. Let's see, for Easter bunnies on Sunday, 3 degrees and looks like 5 on Monday and 7 on Tuesday. Well, that's all sounding very heartening. Some temperatures for you at this hour. Brandon is -12, Churchill -14, in Gimli it's -11, The Paw also -14, Thompson -13, and in Winnipeg it's kind of breezy out there, 31 to 45, and it's -11. Survivors of gender-based violence now have another resource to help access safe and affordable housing in Manitoba. Today, the province of Manitoba and the federal government announced a $27.5 million expansion to the Canadian Housing Benefit. Housing, Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith explained how it works.
Designated specifically for Manitobans, Manitoba's version of Canada's Manitoba Housing Benefit is a portable shelter subsidy for vulnerable populations renting in the private market. The benefit currently targets people experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness, youth who are leaving or who have left the care of Child and Family Services, and people with mental health and addiction issues in designated supportive housing programs. The new Survivors of Gender-Based Violence stream being announced today will support individuals and families who are leaving or who have left conditions that expose them to gender-based violence. I am very pleased that Manitoba is the first province in Canada to co-develop a program that does not require income testing in the first year of the benefit. This recognizes that individuals exiting violence may be experiencing financial abuse or face barriers to accessing other types of benefits because of complex financial issues or situations. This prioritizing of the needs of survivors will be the first of its kind implemented in Canada. We know that safe housing provides stability and helps people reach their potential, and that access to safe, adequate, and affordable housing is essential for the well-being of all Manitobans. The new stream has been designated to reflect the additional barriers faced by people leaving violent situations, and the benefits will help survivors and their children find safe and affordable housing. The shelter benefit will be available to renters and homeowners experiencing gender-based violence, and the benefit amount will vary depending on household size. The monthly benefit will range from a minimum of $350 for a studio or one bedroom, up to a maximum of $805 for a larger unit with 3 bedrooms or more. The benefit was designated in partnership with Women and Gender Equity, WAGE Manitoba, and was guided with calls for justice from the National Inquiry into MMIWG's final report, as well as other reports that address violence against Indigenous women, girls, 2S LGBTQIA+ people. Survivors can now apply for this program through one of 10 gender-based violence shelter agencies and soon through resource centres funded by WAGE Manitoba that provide help for individuals and families affected by gender-based violence. We are very grateful for this partnership with the federal government because we know for far too long women, girls, children, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people have faced limited options that have kept them in dangerous housing situations. The new benefit stream being announced today will give survivors the courage to leave and feel safe, secure, and stable in their homes.
That was Housing, Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith speaking at the legislature earlier today. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1 at 89.3 FM, 990 AM. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. It's 19 minutes after 12. Some Alberta environmental and Indigenous groups are asking a provincial regulator if one of Alberta's major waterways should have the same rights as a person. It's not the first time this issue has come up. The Magpie River in Quebec was granted legal rights a few years ago. It means the river has the right to live, to exist, and to flow. CBC's Colleen Underwood has more.
The Athabasca River Basin extends from the Columbia ice fields in the Rocky Mountains to Lake Athabasca, which straddles the Alberta-Saskatchewan border close to the Northwest Territories. The basin includes streams, lakes, and wetlands, which together amount to about a quarter of Alberta's landmass.
So the river is a lifeline for us.
A lot of nearby communities, such as the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, as well as industries, rely on it for different reasons.
And it's also the way we travel from point A to point B.
Dene elder Alice Rigney grew up along the river's banks. She says she was taught to respect its power, to take only what she needed, and to treat it like any other member of the community.
It's very hard for industry to understand that water has a spirit. We believe it. When I talk about the ecosystem or the environment, I'm that. And, we argue for that.
A similar Indigenous-based argument has resulted in rivers around the world being granted previously unheard of rights. For example, New Zealand's Wanganui River is a person under domestic law. India's Ganges and Yamuna rivers were granted rights by the courts. Ecuador's constitution enshrines rights to nature. And in Canada, the Magpie River in Quebec was granted legal personhood by the Innu Council of Equanishi and the Regional Municipal Council of Manganui. Quebec lawyer Jenny Vega Cardenas argued the Magpie case.
With 9 rights, including the right to exist, the right to be restored, the right to thrive, the right to...
These types of rights mean it would no longer be seen under the law as an object to be owned and exploited, but rather a legal subject with its own rights. Cardenas says she's received a lot of calls asking for advice since it happened.
It's beautiful because it shows that people are getting more and more engaged.
Cardenas says some international rivers rights have been validated in court, but so far the Magpies haven't. Yet she says that hasn't stopped the movement from growing and evolving, as in a recent effort to obtain rights for the Athabasca River in Alberta.
There's nobody designated at this point to speak for the river. However,
That's Jessie Cardinal. She's with an Indigenous-based environmental group called Keepers of the Water. Keepers and the Alberta Wilderness Association are concerned about an oil sands company's request to extend its water license and environmental approvals another 10 years. The mine withdraws water from the Athabasca River directly and diverts it from other sources in the basin. And since only those directly impacted by the application can speak up, the two groups are asking the Alberta Energy Regulator to consider the river a person and grant it standing.
To say, hello, I'm here. I am going to be impacted directly by the decisions that are being made. I am asking you to do your due diligence and ensure all of the items listed in the notice of concern are addressed, and I would like a reply.
Their lawyer, Matt Hulse, says they're banking on the looseness of the term person in provincial regulations. It includes corporations, trusts, and municipalities. So he asks, why not rivers?
So you might call this a technical interpretation, and indeed it is, but this is what we see as a natural evolution of the law to expand things that the law needs to protect, and so far has failed to do so in a way that we think is working.
International experts say, while still rare, protections are emerging in different ways. But water law and policy expert at the University of Melbourne, Aaron O'Donnell, says asking for standing is new.
So it's a bit of a grey area. I think we could be at the beginning of a potentially quite interesting legal journey in Canada because it does open the gate to some really interesting questions of standing.
and questions around water allocation, which she says hasn't really been delved into yet in this movement.
So it's a profound gap.
Meanwhile, 71-year-old Alice Rickney says she's seen firsthand the impact of climate change, development, and industry on the river's water levels.
It's a sad situation now. The water levels are so low.
And she hopes it's not too late for the river to be afforded the protections it deserves so it can continue to give life to future generations. For CBC Radio, I'm Colleen Underwood.
And you're listening to Radio Noon. It's just coming up to 25 minutes after 12 o'clock, which means it's tune time. From Edmonton, this is Von Beeker with Asheville.
A week from now, I'll be coming down right back in this place. And I'm wondering if a different me will land. I'm trying to text you from the losing side of flight delays. I get desperate when things don't go as planned. If I touch down tonight in Asheville, I'm hoping I will, and turn the page. And goes in Asheville, about as steady as my she's getting more like your mother every day. I hear her father tell his girl, and this terminal knows all fear and need and anger at the weight. Some days I shudder at the world. Teenage freedom boys, they're learning to be men from other boys again, and brag about a winning some tournament that don't mean nothing to nobody but them. And I try to pay attention, take all of it in, put away my phone in my back pocket, yeah, 'cause every little thing never happens again. Every little thing never happens again. Touchdown tonight in Asheville, I'm hoping I will, and turn the page. The rain, it comes and goes in Asheville, about as steady as my faith. I think I'm ready taking off for Asheville. My hands out begging for a change. A friend of mine, a glass of wine, and I hear this poet say, she says love is not a fullness but an ache. Yeah, she says love is not fullness but honey, and I don't know how
That was Edmonton's Vaughn Beaker with Asheville. You're listening to Radio Noon, and coming up in the next half hour of the show, got a couple of stories for you. One's very sad about new data showing that Manitoba is on pace to break another record for drug deaths in 2023. We're going to hear from a man whose son was among the people who died last year. But before that, we're going to hear about eagles. I noticed myself that where I live near Lake Winnipeg, there are all these cars pulled over at the side of the road on the way to Gimli. And I think, what's going on? Those people are out, and you look, and there's these two bare trees. And in the branches, roosting like chickens, are like 50 eagles. And there's others sort of flying around, zooming around, and everybody's taking all these pictures. It's really good. We were talking about it at work, and there have been other sightings of people posting saying there's eagles galore. So we're going to get to the bottom of that. We're going to have a hard-hitting interview with an eagle expert. That's coming up at right after the 12:30 news, which are imminent. You're listening to Radio Noon. It's -11 out there. The news is next.
This is CBC News. At 10:30, we're around -11 degrees with wind and flurries over downtown Winnipeg. Hello there, I'm Matt Humphrey. Advocates who work with survivors of gender-based violence applaud a change to the rules around housing benefits. Manitoba is the first province to offer a housing benefit which does not require income testing in the first year. The program is co-developed with the federal government. Lori English is with the West Central Women's Resource Centre. She says there are many barriers which prevent victims from leaving.
Safe, stable, and affordable housing is the biggest of these barriers, and often people return to violence because of the fear of being homeless.
English says the new rules will allow her staff to get survivors of gender-based violence safely housed right away. Applicants could qualify for between $350 and $800 a month. The benefit is expected to support more than 2,600 households. A man who lost his son last year to fentanyl poisoning says numbers from the province are disheartening, but not surprising. In the most recent statistics from the province, 445 people are shown to have died from drugs last year. Joseph Forey's 31-year-old son, Harlan, was one of them. He says the approach to dealing with addictions needs to change.
The drugs have changed so much that traditional treatment is not working. So we need to get more adapted to the drugs that are out there and adapt our treatment centers to deal with those kinds of addictions, say meth, which is mind-altering, and we need to adapt that way.
Forey has started a foundation in his son's name to help those dealing with addiction. He'd like to see more not-for-profit treatment beds available for those who can't afford privately run centers. Down south in Washington, the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing arguments on whether to limit access to the abortion pill. In court today, so far, the justices seem skeptical of the effort to curtail access. Outside the court, competing protesters are making themselves heard.
Ectopic pregnancy is estimated to occur.
The pill, called mifepristone, accounts for 2/3 of abortions in the United States. The Biden administration is appealing a lower court decision restricting the bill's availability. This is the High Court's first abortion case since its ruling 2 years ago, overturning Roe v. Wade. That 1973 decision recognized terminating a pregnancy was a constitutional right. And finally, the risk of significant flooding on the Red River is low this spring. Manitoba's Hydrologic Forecast Centre published its March flood outlook this morning. Barring unusual weather, the Red and its tributaries are expected to remain within their banks. On the Assiniboine River, the risk is low to moderate. The dry conditions this spring have a downside. The province also issued its first fire bulletin of the year. It warns there may be a higher wildfire danger across the province, including a risk of grass and brush fires in open areas as the snow melts. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, Lori. Always a pleasure hearing you, by the way.
Always a pleasure hearing you as well. And by the way, are you a birder of any note?
I've dabbled.
You've dabbled.
Pretty much once you get past 30, birds are interesting.
It's funny how that works, eh?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm super interested in that case. We will be talking about eagles coming up. Have you seen a lot of eagles?
Well,
since
I
you
heard
moved to
your
Manitoba?
story. You saw many roosting?
Yeah, they're just sitting there, like tons of them, just with their arms flapping. Well, not their arms. What do you
Just
call them?
the other
Wings.
day,
Yeah.
I saw one fly over the building.
Did you?
Yeah, downtown Winnipeg.
Oh.
Beautiful bald eagle.
There you go.
Yellow talons and everything.
See, the population is safe. And what about you, Riley? Matt's just weighed in with his birdiness.
Not so much.
Really?
Birds kind of, I don't know.
Freak you
Owls
out?
Scare me.
They scare you. Well, you would have been terrified on the way to Gimli. There I was, going to the Sobeys, and suddenly there were a billion eagles. Well, thank you, Matt. And
Excellent.
perhaps we better move on to Riley's topic. You're not afraid of the weather, are you, Riley?
Nope, especially when we see scattered flurries that has turned into a little bit of blowing snow outside in Winnipeg right now, which, yeah, I think that's how many people are feeling. We'll see that continuing as we get through the afternoon. Temperatures now around -10, -11 across southern Manitoba, including both in Winnipeg and Brandon. Temperatures around -11, -12 in northern Manitoba. So yes, a few scattered flurries as forecast moving through the Red River Valley and parts of the Interlake today. Yes, coupled with some very gusty winds, kind of blowing that around a little bit. We should see sort of on and off flurries as we get through the afternoon hours today. Could turn into a bit of a steadier light snow for a time as we head around the supper hour, and then tapering back off to just a few scattered flurries through the overnight period. Things do start to clear as we get into Wednesday. A mainly cloudy start to the day, still some snow to the east into northwestern Ontario, and that Colorado low bringing some snow and some wind to northern Manitoba next along the Hudson Bay coast. Areas like Gillam, Shamattawa, even Churchill could pick up some snow into the day tomorrow. Then we start to see some clearing finally and back to a mainly sunny sky really across the province as we head through Thursday, with maybe some more flurries along the Hudson Bay coast through the later morning and into the afternoon hours. In terms of accumulation, forecast modeling seeming to suggest about 4 or 5 centimeters to the Winnipeg area. I think that is a bit on the high side. I think that is a bit on the high side. Take that with a grain of salt. I'm thinking, in that maybe 2 centimeter range with some of that scattered flurry activity. Could see 10 to 15, though, through the White Shell into northwestern Ontario, where we are seeing that steadier snow through today. But the story will definitely be the winds through southern Manitoba today. North 20, gusting 40. Could see some gusts even 50 and higher through the Red River Valley through the afternoon. Tapering off a bit as we get through the lunch hour by the time we hit Wednesday. So looking at a high of -7 in Winnipeg today, -7 in Brandon as well. Mainly cloudy toward the west. Some sunnier breaks in the western part of the province as well this afternoon, but mainly cloudy through the Red River Valley and through most of northern Manitoba. So looking at a high of -5 with some lingering scattered flurries tomorrow morning in Winnipeg. And then we turn the page. +1 for Thursday, +2 for Friday. Could see a few more flurries through Saturday, and Easter on Sunday looking sunny and 3 degrees, which is back to seasonal for this time of the year.
Oh, and perfect for hiding those Easter eggs.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Riley.
No problem.
That's Riley Lachek, weather specialist, and you'll hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed. And, of course, you can see him on TV at CBC News at 6. You're listening to Radio Noon. It's 22 minutes before 1 o'clock. Call it an area of eagles, call it a convocation, whatever you call it, dozens of bald eagles are roosting like chickens in the trees along Manitoba highways. To name just a couple of eagle hotspots that have been reported, there's the lakeside of number 9 highway just south of Gimli, and also along Highway 59 near Ile-des-Chênes. Nearly as many people as eagles are pulling over for a look and a photo. Eagles aren't rare in Manitoba, but these big group sightings of them sitting, flapping, and wheeling overhead are creating quite a buzz. And what are they doing and where are they going? To find out, we've reached eagle expert Nicola Coper. Nicola is Dean of Environment at the University of Northern BC and an adjunct professor at U of M. She joins us on Zoom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Nicola, why are we seeing all these eagles together right now? I've seen more than 50 myself in a couple of trees near Gimli.
That's so cool. I mean, I just love watching those.
huge flocks of eagles moving north. So this is, very typical migration period for eagles flying north. Getting ready to breed just as the ice is sort of starting to break up. And we're looking at a bunch of individuals who have spent the winter as far south as Missouri and are in the process of migrating, potentially a couple thousand kilometers up north in order to breed.
So people are remarking that their numbers seem way up. Is that the case, or have they changed their route? What's going on here?
So eagles are really one of our success stories from a conservation perspective. And I have to say, I actually was so surprised about the increase in Manitoba that I had to get out my own calculator last night and make sure that the calculations were right. But so eagle populations have increased by about 10 times across Canada in the last 50 years or so. But in Manitoba, they've actually increased by 58 times in just 5 decades. And so if it feels to you like you see way more eagles than when you were a young person, then you're actually right about that.
So have their routes changed at all over the years, just because of climate change or anything else?
So in general, it seems to be just an increase in the population overall. So up until the 70s, there were some really significant impacts of pesticides in particular, which decreased the nesting success of the bald eagles. And over the sort of previous 100 years, it had been made much worse by active hunting and things like that as well. But as a result of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and the awareness that brought to the problems with DDT in particular, elimination of those pesticides did allow the populations of bald eagles to increase a lot. And so that we sort of removed a human threat from the bald eagles. And at the same time, their food has been supplemented by things like landfills, where they actually do really, they can survive really well in the landfills. In terms of being able to eat food that is provided long-term there. They've also been able to depend a bit on roadkill and things like that. So humans have sort of supplemented their food at the same time as we removed their threats, and this has allowed the population to grow so much.
Well, then I was wondering, where I saw them near Gimli, of course, there's commercial fishing on Lake Winnipeg, and there's spots where the fishermen clean their fish. And I was wondering if the eagles were hanging out opportunistically around there.
Yep, that's completely possible. That's one of the supplemental food sources that we know of. Usually when I see them, they are associated with some little bit of open water. They can depend on this roadkill and waste as well. But they do seem to be sort of happiest if there's a bit of open water as well, which, in theory provides them with fishing opportunities directly. So as the winters have got warmer in the last few years in Manitoba, and there are more areas that have a little bit of open water, then we're also starting to see some bald eagles in small numbers actually overwintering in Manitoba as well.
Mm-hmm. And seeing them all in the tree, like there were dozens and dozens of them, it was a really arresting sight. Do they migrate in flocks like robins and geese and so on? Because they always seem to be more in pairs otherwise.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely do. And they'll migrate in sort of loose family groups as well. So at this time of year, when they're migrating north in order to breed, like they are booking it. They are going as fast as they can because they really need to make it with as long a breeding season as possible. And because of that, they are moving so fast that you will see these patchy groups, these flocks that are all traveling together. And it's really easy to miss as well because they'll be there and they'll just be gone because they have to take off. So at this time of year, they're probably taking 1 to 2 weeks to migrate from the wintering ground up north. And if you think of how far that is, if you're actually coming all the way from Iowa or Missouri, like if we just take a second to think about what it would involve for you to run through Missouri, through Iowa, through South Dakota and North Dakota, from the border to Winnipeg, And then all the way up to Gimli, like that is a serious, you know, can you even imagine trying to do that? And that's basically what all of these birds have done. They've flown on their own. They have no resources. They don't have a car with a bunch of like water and snacks for the road or anything like that.
So they're zipping north, and I noticed a couple looked a little different. Is there another kind of eagle that might be with them?
So we get really low numbers of golden eagles that will sometimes be in those flocks as well, which is really an amazing thing. The golden eagles are a little bit more associated with open plains, and they'll breed further north than a lot of the bald eagles will as well. So if you happen to be lucky enough to see a great big golden eagle in with a flock of bald eagles, that's just a really precious and special sight.
I want to get to myths. Is there or are there a couple of eagle myths that you'd like to bust?
They're probably not going to go after your pets. They're primarily feeding on live fish, and then they'll scavenge as well for dead animals, like we've talked about them using the fish waste. They don't go after live mammals very often, and so you're probably safe with your dogs and cats.
Well, that's a good one to bust. Well, thank you so much for the eagle update. It's been great talking to you.
Pleasure to talk to you as well.
Bye, Nicola.
Bye-bye.
Nicola Coper is Dean of Environment at the University of Northern BC and an adjunct professor at U of M.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The cost of living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
And you're listening to Radio Noon. It's 14 minutes before 1 o'clock. During COVID shutdowns, Merrick Tyler's mother showed him something special, old recordings of his great-great-grandfather speaking in Cree. Translating these recordings inspired the Nahio musician to turn his great-grandfather's teachings into songs. But Tyler wanted to go about this process with care, so he followed his family's cultural protocols. And as he tells Unreserved host Rosanna Deerchild, he takes his responsibility of following these protocols seriously.
I'm not a beater. But if I wanted to learn how to bead, I could probably go onto YouTube and find someone who could teach me how to bead. Maybe Lazy Stitch or whatever it might be, or maybe I'm going to use seed beads or I'm going to use glass beads. You know, I'd find someone there, and then I could take that out and maybe I could sell it. But what I've done is I've taken a art form and I've profited from it, but I have no responsibility to it or the teacher. So this affords me the opportunity to learn from my family and from my generations of my family, to do it in a way that I can still offer it, but still be accountable to and kept on account by family, so that it's no longer about me. It's about community. It's about family. It's about respecting how it was done and how we can do it. And just removing yourself from the end result and just putting yourself in the process of supporting all of it.
Merrick Tyler is from Onion Lake Cree Nation on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border. He's one of several Indigenous musicians sharing their stories through song on this week's episode of Unreserved. It airs today at 1 p.m. on CBC Radio 1, or you can listen anytime on the CBC Listen app. At least 445 people died from drugs in 2023. That's from new preliminary data from Manitoba's chief medical examiner. Joseph Foray's son is one of those people. 31-year-old Harlan Foray died of fentanyl poisoning last April. Since then, Joseph has been working tirelessly to stop drug deaths in our province. He spoke with CBC's Marcy Marcusa this morning on Information Radio.
Well, first of all, condolences to all those families. They were more than just numbers. They were sons, daughters, cousins. So it's a bit disheartening, and it's an indication of what's out there right now is not working. And then we really need to get a proactive step on how we can change the tide on these deaths.
As you obviously mentioned, there are families behind each and every one of these numbers. There are people. These are not numbers, they're people. We're approaching a year since your son Harlan died. I think April 28th is the date. How have you been remembering him? I understand you're looking at trying to start a foundation.
We have developed a foundation. His traditional name was Singing Red Bear. So we've developed the Singing Red Bear Foundation, and then we've incorporated. We have a board of directors, and the whole idea behind the foundation is to help bring awareness. One of our vision statement is is to be a national resource for youth through building and creating awareness initiatives, programs around the dangers of recreational drug use. We want to be able to motivate, inspire, and encourage all youth to aspire to achieve living with the choice of being drug-free. And this was the real eye-opener after my son's death, that this was an area that was being neglected when we were talking about the opioid crisis, when we were talking about drug deaths. Everything was geared towards the addict. But as you know, after my research last year, we found that more than 50% of the deaths that occurred in 2022 where fentanyl was a contributing factor, contributing meaning that it was mixed with other drugs or being sold as something else. So people were dying unexpectedly, not even prepared to deal with an opioid. And that was the real danger that we saw, that, the messaging that was out there right now was giving recreational drug users the false sense of security that, they'd be okay because they're not doing opioids.
Given that, then next week we might see in the budget here that a supervised consumption site may be officially announced. There's no timeline that's been given for that yet.
What
are your thoughts on that?
That's a tricky one, because it's always been like a safe consumption site wouldn't help my son.
Mm-hmm.
A safe consumption site wouldn't have helped the 14-year-old boy that died in Thompson, up north. There is such a small sector which would benefit, from or have aid in that. I think what the larger number, and we have to look at the larger scope. What are we doing on a larger scope, not just for one small sector? Through the No Thanks, I'm Good campaign, we have been out there talking about the dangers of recreational drugs. I think we spoke over the past year to over 6,000 youth in about 10 different communities, going wherever we can. So there needs to be a holistic approach to this. I think the mobile, safe injection sites that we're going to where the people are, I think that was a phenomenal, great idea, because you're not building a hub. As a former addict, and it was around a safe consumption site that I was introduced to heroin, because that's the hub. That's where you went. That's where you knew the drugs would be, and that's where you knew people would be using. So I hope, Manitoba, Winnipeg is really taking that into consider, what they're actually creating by putting up a brick and mortar.
So you have concerns about it, obviously. What?
Very, very much so.
What you were talking about, the other ways, better ways forward to try and reduce the number of deaths we see in Manitoba. I'm curious, as a recovering addict yourself, what challenges exist now for people who use drugs beyond, poison supply, compared to when you were using? Like, how different is it?
It's very, very different from, I've been in recovery now for 5 years. I've worked as a program support worker in addictions. And the drugs have changed so much that traditional treatment is not working. So we need to get more adapted to the drugs that are out there and adapt our treatment centers to deal with those kinds of addictions. Say meth, which is mind altering. We need to adapt that way. What we need, though, I think, is more beds. We need to get the people off the drugs. I think that's the number one concern. We don't need not, because there seems to be a lot of for-profit treatment services that are starting to develop, and we need to start developing those not-for-profit areas because not everybody can afford to go to these high-end treatment centers, and those are the people that we're losing. And just to our neighbors to the east of us, I was watching a program, and their health official there was saying 90% of the people that are dying at home. So they're going to get their drugs, they're going home to use them. They're not going to a safe injection site. They're recreational users or they're hidden addiction. So we really need to
address the problem in a more complex way.
Exactly. And be able to talk about it freely, remove the stigmas, around this whole area of addiction, because mental health and coming out of the pandemic has really shifted the way that we connect with each other now. So we need to get back to that human connection. We need to start talking about this in a free way.
Joseph Foury's son, Harlan Foury, died last April of fentanyl poisoning.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you when it happens.
And how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
This is Radio Noon. It's 5 minutes before 1 o'clock, and I think Dan must have picked this song for me because it goes way back to 1991, and I'm here to tell you that I remember when this came out. It's Prairie Oyster with Just for Old Time's Sake.
Darling, just for old time's sake, turn back the hands of time. Pretend that you're still mine. Just for old time's sake. Now I'm not one for living in the past and thinking about the way it used to be, but I can't help wishing that some things would last, just like the love you used to have for me. So darling, just for old time's sake, turn back the hands of time. Pretend that you're still mine. Just for old time's sake. I know that if once more we shared a kiss, you'd feel that same old longing in your heart and realize that I'm the one you miss.
Oh, wasn't that nice? Prairie Oyster. One of your favorite bands, Chloe?
Honestly, this is one of the first time I've heard them, but I love that. I also love the name.
Prairie Oyster?
Even more.
Oh, there's stories behind that. But you are a mere child. We will pass over that and introduce Chloe Friesen, who is filling in on Up to Speed this afternoon. Let us elevate our minds. What's on the show today?
Yeah, we've got a really fascinating story coming up on Up to Speed. A local trucker saved a 12-year-old boy's life with quick thinking and skillful driving, and now she's officially called a highway angel. That's the name of the award that she just won. So we'll hear her story coming up on Up to Speed.
Well, that sounds heroic.
A highway angel.
Highway angel. That makes me picture like an angel with wings driving a giant truck.
Yeah, I think that's what she is, actually. So We'll meet her on Up to Speed.
We shall tune in. Thanks, Chloe.
Thanks, Lori.
That's Chloe Friesen guest hosting on Up to Speed this afternoon. You can hear Chloe talking to an angel from 3 to 6 this afternoon. Riley will be there too with more talk of snow and wind and then future sunny breaks. I'm Lori Hoogstraten saying goodbye for now, but I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Keep your eyes open for eagle sightings and report back. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.